Just a heads up before we start. Today's episode deals with the topic of child loss. We will be discussing the death of children and the grief that follows. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Please listen with care. Hey friends, welcome back. Or if you're new here, welcome to Dark Roast Caffeine Case Files. I'm Kate. Settle in, pour yourself something strong, and take this one slow because this story doesn't leave easily, and honestly, you won't want it to. On May 25th, 2023, a late spring afternoon in the hamlet of Baltimore, Ontario. It's the kind of place where roads are quiet and properties are spread out. Just a few kilometers north of Cobourg, near the shore of Lake Ontario. Rural, peaceful. The kind of place where parents feel a little safer letting their kids play outside. The kind of place where you trust your neighbors, where you trust the people you leave your children with. Baltimore sits in Hamilton Township, an area of about 10,000 people who mostly know each other, if not personally, then by face, by reputation, by the simple rhythms of small town life. And on that Thursday afternoon, life was moving at its usual small town pace. Parents were finishing work. Daycares were counting down the minutes until pickup. Normal, everyday things. Just after 5 p.m., a young mother named Claire Irwin pulls into a gravel driveway on County Road 45. She's here to pick up her daughter from a home-based daycare called Watch Me Grow. It's a routine she's done countless times before. Park the car, walk to the door, hear the pitter-patter of little feet, see that smiling face pressed against the window, waiting for mommy to arrive. That's the routine. That's the trust we place in caregivers, that when we hand over our most precious people, they'll be kept safe, watched, protected. But on this day, there is no smile at the window. There is no pitter-patter. There is only confusion. And then, parents' worst nightmare. The daycare provider tells Claire that her daughter is missing. Not in the playroom, not in the yard, not napping in her cot, just gone. And in that moment, the world as Claire Irwin knew, it came to a shattering, catastrophic end. Within an hour, little Vienna Rose Irwin would be found, but not alive, not safe. She was discovered on the daycare property, inside a septic tank, located within the fenced-in playground area. She was just 2 years old. This is the story of Vienna Rose Irwin, a story of a beautiful life cut short, a story of a family's relentless fight for answers, a story of a community that refuses to let her memory fade, and a story of questions that, nearly 2 years later, remain painfully unanswered. To understand the depth of this tragedy, you have to understand who Vienna was, not just the circumstances of her death, but the light of her life, the little girl behind the headlines. Vienna Rose Irwin was born on March 30th, 2021, to Claire and Clayton Irwin in Port Hope, Ontario. To her parents, she was their world, their whole universe wrapped up in a tiny 2-year-old package. To her grandparents, Debbie and Bill and Sherry, she was a cherished granddaughter. To her aunts and uncles, Amber, Blake, and Lauren, she was an adored niece. To her cousins, she was a playmate and a friend. In the words of those who loved her, Vienna was described simply and perfectly as the most beautiful and sweetest little girl. Her obituary, shared after her passing, spoke of a child who brought immense joy to everyone who knew her. A little girl whose time on earth was far too short, but whose impact was immeasurable. A family friend, Heath Field, remembered Vienna's fragility and her beauty in an interview with Global News. With visible pain in his voice, he said simply, quote, "She was beautiful. She was this fragile little thing," end quote. On social media, Claire has kept Vienna's spirit alive in the most profound way possible, not just by sharing her grief, but by sharing her memories, by making sure the world knows who Vienna was and not just how she died. A family friend named Nancy Blakely shared a tribute that painted a vivid picture of the little girl they all loved. She wrote about how much Vienna was wanted, how much she was loved and valued before she even arrived, how her family doted on her, how Claire just knew that Vienna was the best thing to ever happen to her, how Clay immediately became her fiercest protector from the moment she was born. And then there are the little details, the small, beautiful specifics that make a child real to us. Vienna loved bugs. She was fascinated by the tiny creatures she'd find in the grass and on the leaves, and she loved butterflies. That last detail, the butterflies, would go on to become something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. It would become a symbol of her short life, a symbol of the movement for justice that followed. A way for a grieving community to say her name without speaking. Butterflies, fragile, beautiful, here for such a short time, but leaving an indelible mark before they go. In the days after Vienna's death, her family shared photos that the public hadn't seen before. A little girl with bright eyes and an even brighter smile, curly hair, chubby cheeks, the kind of smile that could light up a room, the kind of child who made everyone around her believe that the world was fundamentally good. And in those photos, you see something else too. You see parents who adored her. You see a mother and father whose entire lives revolved around this tiny person they'd brought into the world. You see a family unit, complete, happy, ordinary in the best possible way. That family unit was shattered on May 25th, 2023. But the love never dies. And neither does the fight for justice. In the hours and days following May 25th, the initial shockwave of Vienna's death gave way to something else, an outpouring of grief and support so profound that it demonstrated unequivocally how deeply this small community had been rocked. Erica Stapleton, a family friend, couldn't sit idly by while Claire and Clayton navigated the unthinkable. She organized a GoFundMe campaign to support them, to cover funeral expenses, to give them space to grieve without the added burden of financial stress, to show them that they weren't alone. In the campaign description, Stapleton wrote words that would echo through the coming months. Quote, "She was the most beautiful and sweetest little girl, and in her short time here on earth, touched so many. This tragic and sudden loss has rocked the Irwin family and everyone in our small community. The response was immediate and overwhelming. What started as a small gesture of community support quickly swelled. Within days, fund had raised over $115,000, then growing to $130,000. It was a testament not just to the Irwin family's place in the community, but to the universal horror that parents everywhere felt when they heard Vienna's story. There, but for the grace of God I go. It could have been my child. It could have been my daycare. It could have been me." On May 30th and 31st, 2023, friends, family, and even strangers who had never met Vienna lined up at the Allison Funeral Home in Port Hope. They came to pay their respects, to hug the family, to try and find words where none existed, to stand in solidarity with a mother and father whose lives had been permanently fractured. Then, on June 1st, a funeral service was held at St. John's Anglican Church in Port Hope. They gathered to say goodbye to a 2-year-old, to celebrate a life that had barely begun, and to mourn a future that was stolen from her. Imagine walking into that church. Imagine seeing a tiny white casket. Imagine being Claire or Clayton Irwin, having to say goodbye to your baby, not because of illness, not because of accident, but because someone who was supposed to be watching her failed in the most catastrophic way imaginable. The community showed up. They showed up in droves, but showing up for a funeral isn't the same as getting answers. And the answers, the ones the Irwins desperately needed, were nowhere to be found. To understand what happened to Vienna Rose Irwin, we have to walk through May 25th, 2023, minute by minute, because the details matter, the timeline matters, and the gaps in that timeline, the things we still don't know, matter most of all. The day started like any other. Vienna was dropped off at the Watchmake Road daycare facility operating out of a residential property on Baltimore Road, also known as County Road 45, in Hamilton Township, just north of Coburg. It was a home-based daycare, the kind that millions of Canadian parents rely on every single day, the kind that's supposed to feel like an extension of family, the kind where you believe your child is safe. The hours ticked by: playtime, snack time, nap time, door time in the fenced-in playground, normal, everyday activities for a 2-year-old, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that would raise alarm until pickup time. At approximately 5:17 p.m., Claire Irwin arrived at the daycare to get her daughter. She walked to the door, probably tired from her day, probably looking forward to seeing Vienna's face, probably already planning their evening together. Dinner, bath time, stories, bedtime, the ordinary, beautiful rhythm of life with a toddler. But something was terribly wrong. According to Claire, the daycare owner informed her that Vienna was missing, not she's in the backyard, not she's just waking up from a nap, missing. In later interviews and social media posts, Claire described a chilling scene. The daycare staff were just standing there. No one was searching. No one had called police. No one had done anything. It appeared to her that no active search for her daughter was even underway. Claire didn't wait. She didn't ask permission. She didn't stand around hoping someone would take action. She immediately dialed 911, alerting authorities that her child was gone. It was 5:17 p.m. Think about that for a moment. A mother arrives to pick up her child from daycare, a place where she pays people to keep that child safe. And she's the one who has to call emergency services, not the staff, not the owner, the mother. Within minutes, Ontario provincial police officers were on the scene. Soon, they were joined by emergency crews, neighbors, other parents, dozens of people fanning out across the property and surrounding area. They searched the house, they searched the yard, they searched the nearby wooded areas. They searched ditches along the roadway. Everyone held on to hope that Vienna had simply wandered off, that she'd be found scared, maybe crying, but alive. But as the minutes ticked by, that hope began to fade. At approximately 6:17 p.m., exactly 1 hour after Claire's 911 call, searchers made a devastating discovery. Vienna was found. She was located right there on the daycare property, but the location was horrifying. She was found inside a septic tank. Now, this is where the story gets complicated and where misinformation would cause deep, lasting pain for the Irwin family. In those first chaotic hours, initial police scanner reports were picked up by media outlets around the world. Those reports described an open well. The Independent, a UK-based news outlet, ran a headline on May 29, 2023 that read, quote, 2-year-old found dead in well after wandering away from daycare, end quote. That detail, open well, spread rapidly. It shaped the public's initial understanding of what happened. It suggested a tragic accident. A toddler wanders off, falls into an unsecured well, and drowns. Horrible, yes, but accidental. The Irwin family has consistently and emphatically stated that this is not what happened, and they have the evidence to back it up. Vienna was not found in an open well. She was found in a closed septic tank that was located inside the fenced-in playground area of the daycare. This distinction matters. It matters enormously. A closed septic tank isn't something a child can simply wander into. It's an enclosed structure, a contained system. For a 2-year-old to end up inside it, something had to have gone terribly wrong with the tank itself. A missing lid, a broken cover, an access point that should have been secured but wasn't. And it was located in the exact area where children were supposed to be playing under supervision. Quote, "The grief we feel over losing Vienna is compounded by the trauma of knowing where she was found." End quote. Claire would later say in a social media post, "The location inside that fenced playground, inside that septic tank, meant that Vienna didn't wander off property. She wasn't lost in the woods. She was right there, in the place where she was supposed to be safe." While the adults charged with her care apparently failed to notice she was gone. First responders pulled Vienna from the tank and immediately began CPR. She was rushed to Northumberland Hills Hospital, just a short drive away. Doctors and nurses worked desperately to save her, but it was too late. The sweetest little girl was gone. In the emergency room that night, a family member later described the scene in a TikTok video. Quote, "I'll never forget the scream my sister made in the ER when they told us it was Vienna and that she was gone." End quote. That scream, a mother's scream, when she learns her child is dead, is not something anyone should ever have to hear. It's not something anyone should ever have to experience. And yet, on May 25th, 2023, Claire Irwin became part of a club no parent ever wants to join, the club of those who have buried their children. In the hours after Vienna's death, the Watch Me Grow daycare closed its doors. It would never reopen. The property on County Road 45, once a place where parents dropped off their children with trust and hope, became a site of horror and grief. The Ontario Provincial Police launched a full-scale investigation led by a major case manager with its criminal investigation branch. They announced that they were working in conjunction with the Office of the Chief Coroner for Ontario. The message to the public was clear. This was a serious investigation, and they would leave no stone unturned. OPP released a statement in those early days saying, quote, "The OPP would like to reassure the community that the investigation is ongoing, and we remain committed to completing a detailed and thorough investigation into the details surrounding this death." End quote. But they also added a caveat, one that would become painfully familiar over the following months. Quote, "In order to protect the integrity of this investigation, no further information or details can be shared at this time." End quote. The community waited. The family waited, and the silence stretched on. In the wake of the tragedy, the Irwin family tried to grieve. But grief is hard when you have no answers, when you don't know what happened, when the people who were supposed to be watching your child have offered no explanation, when investigators won't tell you anything. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. The OPP remained largely silent, declining interview requests and sticking to their script. They couldn't share information because it would, quote, "protect the integrity of the investigation," end quote. For Claire and Clayton Irwin, the silence was a second layer of torment. They weren't just grieving their daughter. They were being kept in the dark about how she died. about who might be responsible, about whether anyone would ever be held accountable. Claire began to channel her grief into action. On her Instagram account, she started speaking out. She started demanding answers and accountability. She started using her platform to make sure the world wouldn't forget Vienna. In one heartbreaking post from April 2024, nearly a year after Vienna's death, Claire wrote words that cut to the heart of her pain. Quote, "She deserves that at the very least, she was only 2, left in the care of people we thought we could trust. But now it's very obvious they didn't care at all." End quote. That last line is devastating in its simplicity. They didn't care at all. The people entrusted with her daughter's life, Claire believed, had failed her in the most profound way possible. And the fact that they hadn't been held accountable, hadn't even been publicly identified or questioned, added insult to unimaginable injury. Throughout the spring of 2024, as the 1-year anniversary of Vienna's death approached, the family and their supporters grew increasingly vocal. They wanted answers. They wanted transparency. They wanted to know what happened inside that daycare on May 25th, 2023, but the OPP's position remained unchanged. On May 24th, 2024, the day before the 1-year anniversary, they issued a brief statement reiterating that the investigation was ongoing. No other details were provided, no timeline for completion, no hints about what they'd found or hadn't found. For a family desperate for closure, it was like talking to a brick wall. On May 25th, 2024, exactly 1 year after Vienna Rose Irwin was found dead in that septic tank, the community of Coburg refused to let the world forget. Approximately 100 residents lined Division Street in Coburg, holding signs and standing in solidarity. Many of the signs featured butterflies, that symbol of Vienna's short, beautiful life. Many bore the hashtag that had come to define the movement, hashtag Justice for Vienna. As drivers passed by, they honked their horns in a deafening show of support. The sound echoed off of the buildings, a chorus of solidarity that must have been both comforting and heartbreaking for the Irwin family. The rally wasn't just about remembrance. It was about frustration. It was about demanding answers from officials who had remained silent for an entire year. Lindsay Cox, a supporter who had been instrumental in organizing the Butterfly Mural project, spoke to Global News about why she and others were there. Quote, "Many of us who are parents have put our kids in daycare, having trusted people with our kids, our hearts walking outside of us," she said, quote, "It could have been me. It could have been my friend. It could have been anyone that day," end quote. Vanessa Stadecki and Heath Field, friends of Vienna's parents, were also at the rally. Their words captured the dual emotions of grief and anger that permeated the crowd. Quote, "Saying her name is really hard because she deserved so much more," end quote. Field said, quote, "She was beautiful, she was this fragile little thing." But alongside the grief was a fierce demand for accountability. Field didn't mince words. Quote, "Neglect is one thing. This far surpasses what happened to Vienna," end quote. They posed the question that haunted everyone. Quote, "A little child doesn't just end up in a septic tank," end quote. The lack of information from investigators had created a vacuum, and into that vacuum flowed false rumors, according to Field. Some in the community had heard that the incident was deemed an accident. Others believed the investigation was already concluded. Neither was true. But without official communication, speculation filled the gap. Quote, "That's a huge thing that hasn't helped the parents through this," end quote, Field said. The Justice for Vienna movement had spread beyond Coburg by this point. In neighboring communities, butterfly murals painted by Lindsay Cox could be found in the windows of businesses, a quiet, beautiful reminder that Vienna was not forgotten. Cox explained the motivation behind the murals. Quote, "Somebody out there knows an answer, something, information that they haven't come forward with," end quote. On her Instagram account that weekend, Claire Irwin posted a message to her daughter that brought many to tears. She called the past year a nightmare that never ends. She wrote, quote, "One of the many hard things is trying to figure out who we are now without you, and missing who we used to be. Add on the compounded trauma of how you were taken from us is an added layer," end quote. But even in her grief, Claire expressed gratitude. She thanked the community and friends for their support, stating, "We need you more than you know." And Heathfield made a promise that would prove prophetic. Quote, "The truth will come out and justice will be served. And until it does, this is what we're going to keep doing." Then, just before Christmas in 2024, came news that devastated the Irwin family and their supporters. After 19 months of investigation, the Ontario Provincial Police were done. On December 13th, 2024, the OPP confirmed to Claire and Clayton Irwin that their investigation was closed. The news became public on December 15th. And the result? No charges would be filed. No one would be held criminally responsible for Vienna's death. Sergeant Rob Simpson from the OPP Corporate Communications Bureau delivered the news in carefully measured language. He confirmed that the investigation had been thorough and professional, led by a major case manager with the OPP Criminal Investigation Branch. But then came the explanation that would infuriate the Irwin family and their supporters. Quote, "In consultation with the Crown, charges are not being laid at this time as there would be no reasonable prospect of conviction," end quote. No reasonable prospect of conviction. That phrase is legal language for "we don't think we can win in court," meant that the OPP and the Crown prosecutors had looked at all the evidence and decided it wasn't enough. Not enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime had been committed. Not enough to name a suspect. Not enough to seek justice for Vienna. Simpson acknowledged that this outcome would be difficult for many to accept. Quote, "Our investigation team worked diligently to seek and fully investigate all information as part of this case. We recognize that this outcome may be difficult to accept. We want to assure everyone that this conclusion was reached after careful consideration and a detailed review of all the facts." He added, "We sincerely sympathize with the family as they have suffered a great personal loss. We continue to offer them our deepest condolences." For the Irwin family, difficult to accept was a staggering understatement. This wasn't just difficult, it was a betrayal. 19 months of waiting, 19 months of silence, 19 months of hoping that someone would be held accountable for their daughter's death. And now, nothing. But Claire and Clayton did not give up. If the system wouldn't get them answers, they would find another way. Within days of the OPP announcement, a new GoFundMe campaign was launched. Its title said everything. Quote, "The fight has just begun. Justice for Vienna," end quote. The goal was ambitious: raise enough money to hire a private investigator, someone who could look at the case with fresh eyes, someone who could pursue leads the police might have missed, someone who worked for the Irwins, not for the system. The community responded with the same overwhelming generosity they'd shown in the days after Vienna's death. Donations poured in from across Northumberland County and beyond. By early 2025, the fund had raised more than $144,000. But the GoFundMe wasn't the only source of support. The community got creative. They found ways to give that were as beautiful as they were practical. In early January 2025, Dewhurst Bakery in Campbellford, twice named the Sweetest bakery in Canada, announced something special. On January 10th, they would host Donuts for Vienna Rose Irwin's fundraiser, with all proceeds going toward the Irwin family's private investigation costs. The bakery's Facebook announcement captured the spirit of the gesture. Quote, "Her family has experienced a tremendous loss, and we at Dewhurst would like to give them some support with doing a donut day for Vienna Rose." End quote. People lined up for donuts that day, not just because Dewhurst makes exceptional pastries, but because they wanted to be a part of something bigger. They wanted to contribute, even in a small way, to fight for justice. Then, on April 13th, 2025, another fundraiser drew strong support in Cobourg. Moxie's Hair Co. hosted an event from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., filling the salon with visitors participating in a raffle table sale and 50-50 draw. A curated treasure sale offered unique finds, and guests enjoyed complimentary refreshments while they shopped and donated. Ashia Faloche, co-owner of Moxie's, explained the motivation behind the event. The community, she said, hadn't forgotten Vienna. They still wanted answers, and through the event, they added another $5,000 to help the Irwins in their private investigation. Faloche told reporters, quote, "Today's turnout showed that the community hasn't forgotten Vienna and still wants answers." That phrase, "hasn't forgotten," is crucial. In an age of 24-hour news cycles and constant information overload, it's easy for tragedies to fade from public memory. But in Northumberland County, Vienna Rose Irwin remains a presence, a butterfly in a window, a fundraiser at a bakery, a rally on a street corner, a community that refuses to let her story end. The fight for justice found a powerful ally in early 2025. David Piccini, the member of Provincial Parliament for Northumberland Peterborough South, stepped forward to offer his support. On January 23, 2025, Cheney met with Claire and Clayton to discuss next steps. After the meeting, he took to Facebook to share his thoughts, and his words would offer a new glimmer of hope to a family that had been starved of it for nearly 2 years. Quote, "We can never ever normalize the death of a child in our community," end quote, Piccini wrote. Quote, "As a public policy maker, I remain committed to assisting the family any way I can," end quote. Cheney pledged his support for a potential coroner's inquest into Vienna's death. For those unfamiliar with the term, a coroner's inquest is a public hearing conducted by a coroner to investigate the circumstances surrounding a death. It's not a criminal proceeding. It doesn't determine guilt or innocence, but it can be a powerful tool for uncovering truth and preventing future tragedies. An inquest, Piccini noted, couldn't bring Vienna back. Nothing could, but it can ensure this sort of tragedy never happens again. It could bring unanswered questions to light. It could make recommendations to improve daycare safety to prevent other children from suffering the same fate. For a family that had been kept in the dark for nearly 2 years, the possibility of a public inquest offered something they desperately needed: transparency, a chance to hear in an open forum what had been learned about their daughter's death, a chance to ask questions and demand answers. As of early 2025, inquest had not been confirmed, but Piccini's support gave the Irwin family and their supporters renewed hope. Someone in power was listening. Someone was willing to help. Nearly 2 years after Vienna's death, so many questions remain unanswered. And until those questions are addressed, whether through the private investigation, a coroner's inquest, or some other means, the Irwin family cannot find closure. Let's walk through what we know and what we don't know. Question 1. What was the condition of the septic tank? This perhaps the most critical question. Vienna was found inside a septic tank located within a fenced playground area. For her to have entered that tank, there must have been an opening. Was the lid missing? Was it broken? Was it improperly secured? Had the daycare operators conducted regular inspections of the property? Were there any prior complaints or concerns about the tank's condition? These are not abstract questions. They go to the heart of whether negligence occurred and whether that negligence rises to the level of criminal culpability. And 2. How long was Vienna missing before anyone noticed? Claire Irwin arrived at the daycare at 5:17 p.m. and was told Vienna was missing. But when did the staff realize she was gone? Did they conduct a search before Claire arrived? Did they call anyone? The fact that Claire described staff as just standing there when she arrived suggests that either they hadn't noticed Vienna's absence until that moment, or they had noticed but failed to take appropriate action. In a properly run daycare, children are counted regularly. Head counts happen throughout the day, during transitions, after outdoor play, before meals. How did a 2-year-old go missing without anyone realizing it? Question 3. Why wasn't Claire notified sooner? This question haunts every parent who hears Vienna's story. Claire arrived at the daycare expecting to pick up her daughter, only to be told she was missing. At no point did anyone from the daycare call her to say, "We have a problem." At no point did anyone alert emergency services. Claire herself had to dial 911. Imagine that phone call. Imagine being the one to report your own child missing from a place where you paid people to keep her safe. The betrayal inherent in that scenario is almost too much to comprehend. Question 4. What did the investigation actually find? The OPP has stated that their investigation was thorough and professional, and that they concluded with the Crown before concluding that charges were not viable. But they have not shared what they found. What evidence did they gather? What witnesses did they interview? What conclusions did they reach about how Vienna ended up in that tank? The family and community are left to speculate. And speculation breeds rumors that Heathfield said have only added to the family's pain. Question 5. Who was responsible for the daycare's operation? The daycare has been identified as Watch Me Grow Daycare on County Road 45. But who owned it? Who operated it? Were they licensed? Had there been prior complaints or inspections? These basic facts remain largely unknown to the public, and possibly to the Irwin family as well. Without knowing who was responsible, it's impossible to hold anyone accountable. One of the most painful aspects of this case for the Irwin family has been the spread of misinformation, much of it stemming from those initial inaccurate reports that Vienna was found in an open well. That description suggests a very different scenario from what actually occurred. An open well on a property is a hazard, certainly, but a 2-year-old wandering away from supervision and falling into an uncovered well is a tragic accident. It's neglectful, perhaps, but it fits a certain narrative. Child wanders, child falls, child dies. What actually happened, according to the family, is different and more disturbing. A closed septic tank located inside a fenced playground should not be accessible to children. For Vienna to have entered it, something had to be wrong with the tank itself. And the fact that it was inside the fenced area means she didn't wander off. She was in the exact place where she was supposed to be, under the supervision of people who were supposed to be watching her. The Weekly Voice, in an article published around the 1-year anniversary, addressed this discrepancy directly. Quote, "While media initially reported she had wandered and fallen into an open well, her family contends She was found in a closed septic tank within the daycare's play area. The discrepancy has fueled a campaign for truth and justice, end quote. This isn't a minor detail. It's central to understanding what happened and central to the family's demand for accountability. The open well narrative minimizes what occurred. It suggests a tragic accident. The family's account suggests something far more troubling, a failure of supervision so complete that a child ended up inside a septic tank while no one noticed she was gone. The spread of this misinformation has had real consequences. It has shaped public perception. It may have shaped the investigation, and it has added to the Irwin family's burden, forcing them to correct the record while simultaneously grieving their daughter. In the face of silence from officials and misinformation in the media, the community has built something beautiful, a movement that ensures Vienna's name is spoken, her face is seen, and her story is told. The symbol of that movement is the butterfly. It started small, a few people painting butterflies on windows, sharing them on social media, but it grew. Soon, butterfly murals began appearing in businesses across Coburg and neighboring communities. Each butterfly is a reminder. Each butterfly is a promise. Each butterfly is a way of saying, we haven't forgotten. Lindsay Cox, the supporter who painted many of these murals, explained their significance. Quote, somebody out there knows an answer, something, information that they haven't come forward with, end quote. The butterflies are a message to that someone, whoever they are, wherever they are. That community is waiting. That truth matters. That Vienna matters. On TikTok, the hashtag Justice for Vienna has become a gathering place for supporters. They share videos, they share memories, they share their frustration with the lack of answers. One user posted, quote, Vienna Rose Irwin was safely dropped off at a daycare on May 25, 2023, just outside of Coburg, Ontario. But yet later that evening, when her mother went to pick her up, Vienna was missing. The daycare Watch Me Grow never notified the family, and in fact, Claire was the one to call 911 herself. Within an hour of that call, Vienna was found in the closed septic tank on the daycare's property. What did Vienna's day look like? How could a beautiful 2-year-old meet this demise? Why was Claire not notified sooner than pickup? What law protects families from this in the future? All questions still outstanding. Another user shared a deeply personal memory. Quote, I'll never forget the scream my sister made in the ER when they told us it was Vienna and that she was gone. The pain caused by this tragic accident is immeasurable and will never go away. The only thing we can do to help ease the pain is to continue saying her name, continue demanding answers be found, and give her parents some small piece of understanding as to how this happened to their 2-year-old baby girl. That post ended with a powerful observation Claire and Clayton have for Vienna. Their love is what we should all aspire to. In August 2024, the community organized a chalk night at the Coburg waterfront, an event where people could gather, draw butterflies, write messages, and remember Vienna together. It was the kind of grassroots gathering that doesn't make headlines, but means everything to a grieving family. The movement has also inspired acts of personal dedication. One supporter, a runner, completed 2 half marathons in Vienna's honor, calling the effort, quote, running with the butterflies. She posted about the experience, quote, this race was bittersweet. It was the second of 2 half marathons I set out to do in honor of the beautiful Vienna Rose. The Irwin family is still looking for answers as to what happened to their beautiful daughter at the Watch Me Grow daycare. There continues to be an army that continues to stand behind them, demanding answers. An army. That's what the Justice for Vienna movement has become. An army of people who never met Vienna, but refused to let her story fade. An army of people who show up at rallies, buy donuts, paint butterflies, and run races, all in the name of a little girl they never knew. Throughout this ordeal, Claire Irwin has been remarkably public about her grief and her fight. Her Instagram account has become a window into the soul of a mother who lost everything and who refuses to be silent. On the 1-year anniversary of Vienna's death, Claire posted a message that captured the impossible duality of her existence. Still a mother, but a mother without her child. She wrote about the nightmare that never ends. She wrote about trying to figure out who we are now without you. She wrote about missing who we used to be. And then she added a line that speaks to the unique horror of how Vienna died. Quote, "Add on the compounded trauma of how you were taken from us is an added layer," end quote. That added layer is something no parent should have to carry. The knowledge not just that your child died, but that she died in a place where she should have been safe, that she died while people who were supposed to be watching her failed to notice she was gone, that she died in a septic tank, a detail so horrifying it's almost impossible to process. In another post from April 2024, Claire expressed the betrayal that lies at the heart of this case. Quote, "She was only 2, left in the care of people we thought we could trust. But now it's very obvious they didn't care at all," end quote. And those words, "they didn't care at all," are devastating. They speak to a breach of trust so complete that it has fundamentally altered how Claire sees the world. If you can't trust the people watching your child, who can you trust? Clayton Irwin has been less publicly vocal, but his presence at fundraisers and meetings, standing beside Claire, supporting her, fighting alongside her, speaks volumes. Together they present a united front. Together they are determined that Vienna will not be forgotten. In January 2025, after meeting with MPP David Piccini, the family issued statements through his office expressing gratitude for his support and hope for a coroner's inquest. They are still fighting. They will keep fighting because that's what parents do. As we reach the end of this story, we are left where we started, with the memory of a little girl, 2 years old, born March 30th, 2021, died May 25th, 2023. In between those dates, a life lived fully and loved deeply. A daughter to Claire and Clayton, a granddaughter to Debbie, Bill, and Sherry, a niece to Amber, Blake, and Lauren, a cousin to children who will grow up hearing stories about the little girl they never got to know, a lover of bugs, a girl who was fascinated by butterflies, a beautiful and sweet child who touched so many in her short time on Earth, a child who should be turning 5 years old soon, a child who should be starting school, making friends, learning to read, and discovering the world, a child who should be filling her parents' lives with joy, with birthday parties and school plays and all the ordinary miracles of growing up. Instead, she is remembered through hashtags and butterfly murals and fundraisers and rallies. Instead, her name is spoken at protests and her face is shared on social media. Instead, her parents spend their days fighting for answers instead of reading bedtime stories. The legal process has stalled. The police investigation is closed. No charges have been filed. No one has been held accountable. But for Claire and Clayton, the quest for justice will not end until they have the answers they deserve. They have made a promise to their daughter, and they are keeping it. They have raised over $144,000 for a private investigation. They have the support of their MPP and the hope of a coroner's inquest. They have an army behind them, an army of people who show up, who donate, who paint butterflies, who refuse to forget. On a sign at the 1-year supporter rally, a supporter held up a message for Vienna. It was simple. It was devastating. It read, "You should be here. She should be. She should be here." Annoying her parents, making messes, asking questions, growing up. She should be here, living the life that was stolen from her on a spring afternoon in 2023. And as long as her family keeps fighting, keeps asking questions, and keeps saying her name, Vienna Rose, will never be forgotten. The butterflies will remain in the windows, the fundraisers will continue, the rallies will go on, and somewhere, somehow, the truth will come out. Because justice for Vienna isn't just about one family's fight. It's about every parent who has ever dropped a child at a daycare. It's about every person who believes that those entrusted with our children's care should be held accountable when that trust is betrayed. It's about making sure that no other family has to go through what the Irwins have endured. Vienna Rose Irwin was 2 years old. She loved bugs and butterflies. She was beautiful and sweet, and she deserved so much more than she got. As we close this episode, I want to leave you with the words of Heathfield, spoken at that one-year rally. Quote, "The truth will come out and justice will be served. And until it does, this is what we're going to keep doing." End quote. This is what we're going to keep doing, saying her name, sharing her story, demanding answers, painting butterflies, showing up for Vienna, for justice, for the sweetest little girl. As of May 23rd, 2025, the Irwin family has filed a civil lawsuit for $7 million against the daycare owners, their employees, contractors who were responsible for the installation and maintenance of that septic tank, and the Halliburton-Kawartha Pine Ridge District Health Unit, who is also responsible for inspection of that septic tank. In total, there are 19 defendants. Someone in this group of people must be held responsible for Vienna's death, and justice must be brought to her family. And no matter the amount of money they may win in this lawsuit, it will never replace the sweetest little girl, Vienna Rose Irwin. As I come to the end of this episode, we extend our deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Vienna Rose Irwin. If you have information that could help the Irwin family's private investigation, please consider reaching out through the official Justice for Vienna social media channels. In the next episode, I will be talking about the story of 9-year-old Christine Jessup vanishing from her quiet Ontario hometown. When her body was found on New Year's Eve, the crime shattered a community and launched one of the most complex and flawed investigations in Canadian history. And thank you for listening to the Vienna Rose story. As always, stay safe and please take care of yourself after listening to this episode. Do something grounding, call a friend, pet a dog, sit in the sunlight for a few minutes. The darkness in these stories is real, but so is the light in the world. Don't forget to find it. Please like and subscribe. Follow me on Substack, Instagram, and Facebook. The links are in the show notes. Stay tuned for more coffee and more crime. Bye now.